Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the video. I'm GetGoodGuy, and today, because many of you seem to enjoy the throwback weapon featurette on the Italian Infantry I put out the other day, I figured I'd produce another one for you. This time featuring the Lebel Model 1886 Infantry. Lots of people have told me that they think the Lebel has the best scout iron sights in the game on my video about iron sights themselves a little while back, and then more people mentioned it in my Italian Infantry video, which I'll link to in the description and in my pinned comment if you want to catch up on that. So I figured it was time to see what all the fuss was about with the Lebel Infantry. So what we'll be doing is measuring this weapon up against the three most popular infantry scout rifles, in order to see if it's worth you using it against the currently accepted meta, just as we did for the modern infantry. And on the day of making this video, the top three most used infantry scout rifles are exactly the same as last time, those being the Martini Henry Infantry, the SMLE Infantry, and the Russian Infantry. Any stats used for these comparisons are sourced from Something.com, as it's more reliable and goes into greater statistical depth than BF1 itself does, and any opinions are purely my own. Now to kick this off, as it was the inspiration for this video, yes, I really like the iron sights on the Lebel Infantry. They're very clear, nothing gets in the way, and that's great for tracking a target. Especially for someone like me who doesn't have great eyesight. Perhaps this won't be the case for everyone, of course, but I'd put the Lebel Infantry iron sights up there with some of the best in BF1. With that said, let's get into the stats. And what better place to start than damage numbers? Well, the Lebel has the common scout rifle damage figures, hitting for 100 maximum damage to the chest and 80 minimum damage to the chest. Therefore, it falls right in line with two of our comparison weapons, the SMLE and the Russian. But they all obviously fall behind the Martini, as it's the hardest hitting scout weapon with a max damage of 112, but it is also held back by a lower minimum damage standing at 70. So the Martini can deal more damage when hitting limbs within its effective range, making for more reliable one-shot kills, but it's overall less consistent for damage when you bring all ranges into the equation. But what good are damage figures without knowing what the effective range of a weapon is? So the Lebel can drop a full health enemy with a chest shot from between 50 and 87 meters. So although it's generally viewed as a relatively close range rifle on the whole, when compared with the three most popular infantry rifles, it actually sits as a bit of a mid-range option, albeit leaning more towards closer range. This is because the Martini has an effective range of 30 to 80 meters, but with severe drawbacks, especially at range, which we'll get to later. The SMLE has an effective range of 40 to 75 meters, and the Russian has an effective range of 60 to 98 meters. So, when trying to contest gunfights at longer ranges, how does the Lebel feel? Well, it has a muzzle velocity of 720 meters per second, and I did notice this in a slightly negative fashion, probably because the previous weapon featurette on the Italian Infantry features a stat of 820 meters per second, so the Lebel felt a tad slower and more leading of the target was necessary. Now, when comparing the muzzle velocity with the top three options, the Russian also stomps it with again a stat of 820. The SMLE is just slightly faster than the Lebel, standing at 740, and the Martini has an abysmal 440, which obviously is one of the things I was alluding to holding it back for ranged shots. Then in terms of just taking shots, the Lebel has a rate of fire of 56 rounds per minute. I'd say this is very healthy. It's the same stat as the Russian infantry. It's faster than the SMLE, which has a stat of 52 rounds per minute, and obviously the Martini is barely worth considering for this stat, as it's only capable of 25 rounds per minute due to the need to reload after every shot. And usually this puts the Martini at the very bottom of the pile for reloading in my book, no matter what the competition or discussion is. But today could be different, because reloading is where the Lebel really makes the user suffer. The single bullet reload and strip reload times actually aren't too bad themselves. However, it has a terrible bridge delay and post-reload delay, essentially meaning that trying to fire after a reload is a huge pain as your guy continues to fiddle around in an animation. You can try to cancel this, but I had mixed results with it, generally finding that I still couldn't fire around until the necessary amount of time had passed. This then also goes for using K-bullets. This might be the worst scout weapon in terms of utilizing K-bullets, because the amount of time it takes to chamber each one is just painful. Trying to insert a K-bullet round in order to quickly react to a plane flying over, for example, just really isn't all that viable. You have to already be prepared for it because it just takes too long. However, to bring back the positivity, you do have 8 rounds to utilize per reload with the Lebel, which is actually very good for the scout class. When comparing with the top 3 options, it leaves the Martini's ability to fire 1 round per reload absolutely in the dust, and it has the advantage over the Russian, which has the pretty standard for the scout class 5 rounds per reload. But the SMLE SMLE obviously has that fantastic stat of 10 rounds per reload, making it essentially best in class for this stat. But regardless of being beaten by the SMLE here, 8 rounds per reload does help to balance out how bad the reload is, and it certainly needs to be this way. Moving on, the Lebel has the same recoil as the SMLE and the Russian, which is basically standard across the vast majority of scout rifles, all of them beating the Martini, which has 5 times the vertical recoil. And then essentially all the other stats are the same for the Lebel and the 3 comparison weapons. As an aside, I should mention staying in ADS between shots, as this is an infantry scout rifle after all. Just like in my Mosin-Nagant featurette, you'll notice that this is something I don't really do, both because I'm in the habit of coming out of ADS between shots, and also because I like to get a quick view of what's around me before firing again. But if you do like to stay in ADS for extended periods of time, then I'd say the Lebel is fantastic for this, because the animation for chambering a fresh round actually pulls the weapon down, so your view of the target isn't obscured at all. Overall then, this weapon was fun for me to use. It's got great killing potential at close and medium range, while still being able to pick people off at longer ranges if you're capable. And the sights also help there, as they're extremely clear. As alluded to earlier, this weapon essentially falls in between our top 3 infantry scout rifles as a great option beyond super close quarters and before extreme long range. I will say though that I actually preferred using the Mosin-Nagant purely because the reload of the Lebel really did feel like a bit of a burden to me sometimes. But if that doesn't bother you, then the Lebel Infantry could definitely be worth taking a punt on if you haven't tried it out recently. So what do you think? Do you like the Lebel Infantry, or will you stick to your usual scout weapon? If so, what is it? Let me know in the comment section below. Now let's go over to the Board of Awesome for the epic people who allow you to get content from me full time by supporting the channel on Patreon. Without Patreon support, I simply couldn't make this many videos, as I'd need to go and get another job. So thank you so much to everybody on here. If you want to join them on the Board of Awesome, the links to the Patreon page is in the description and in my pinned comment. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you don't want to miss future videos, turn on notifications with the bell button and select to always be notified with the options tab that should then pop up, and then feel free to like, share and subscribe. I'm GetGoodGuy, and I'll see you next time. Laters.